Meet Abraham Rader, an atmospheric technician giving Fulp Station a spin. Fulp Station is a server that carries its own set of benefits and disadvantages. At certain times of day, TG Station does not have many players, whereas Fulp Station has more players on during those hours. However, Fulp Station is a medium roleplay server, which means should you roll antagonist, you generally cannot simply set loose a Tesla ball to destroy the station just because you want to. In fact, there are strict rules of engagement for you as an antagonist, particularly if your assignment is just to assassinate one other player. Despite its rules, Fulp Station is, to put it diplomatically, more relaxed than some other medium RP servers out there. It also does not have sister servers, which makes the consequences of being banned significantly lower. These differences in the end make Fulp Station different, but still enjoyable, so I therefore recommend this server if your preferred server is lacking players, or if you're actually into medium RP, because the server isn't try hard enough to be annoying. That all aside, being an internal affairs agent for this round of Fulp Station, my goal is to kill Adler Job for the crime of insulting his manager, and while I may not be able to destroy the entire station to do so, I can elect to ignore doing my job. First things first, I equip myself with some thermal goggles to see people through walls, and I use a tracker to try to figure out where my target is. It turns out Adler Job did not only insult his manager, but is now being a total shitter and shooting up his research director boss with hot lead injections, thereby giving my job a certain sense of urgency. Security proved itself to be near useless, because a sec officer couldn't figure out how to ask the AI to let it into the science department, and I got closer to the murder scene than security got. I watched Adler get jumped by the rest of the scientists around xenobiology, and then get stuffed into a slime holding tank for a conjugal visit of the jelly variety. I figured this was a good opportunity to deploy a bomb on the other side of the wall and dipped out. But some scientists saw it, and it had a 90-second timer, so it ended up being defused. Meanwhile, the slime did my job for me, so I figured I could just kick back the rest of the shift. I ended up stress eating for long enough that it left me with a case of gout, and returned to the scene of my crime only to find the bomb gone. Unfortunately, the crew decided to revive Adler, which made my job more complicated now, and I snooped around medical trying to find him. With a sec officer watching over his body, a successful kill was not really in the works for me there, and I decided to devise Plan B. To a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, and to an atmospheric technician, every situation seems solvable by fire, so I decided I wouldn't burn the whole station, and just try to burn whatever room Adler ended up in. So I primed the whole air supply to get the system ready for my pre-death cremation attempt. I also stocked up on a plentiful supply of welders, because I had no clue how many it would take to get to Adler. I knew Adler was in the brig, and started casing the joint, and realized a spacewalk was probably the best way to get access. So I started wandering around outside the station. The other thing I learned about medium RP servers is that the other players are generally competent people, and the rest of engineering soon figured out the air supply had plasma in it, and that I was the one who did it. I confessed to it and made an empty promise to fix the problem, but the chief engineer could handle fixing it on his own. At any rate, to avoid having the space cops called on me, I played off just being a moron, which was not far from the truth, and I determined the vague area Adler was held in, but could not tell exactly where he was. I figured he was in Perma somewhere, so I blew one of the windows with C4. However, it turned out C4 doesn't completely destroy a reinforced window, which means either Space Station 13 or Counter-Strike is dead wrong about that explosive's capabilities, and I ended up shocking myself trying to smash out the electrified grill. I therefore upped the ante with some X4 and got the hole blasted properly. There was only a random prisoner who committed suicide in the Perma brig, and I ended up wasting some time out of frustration over not seeing where Adler was. I did see the warden and started making demands of him to turn over Adler. The warden was less than impressed and stormed into Perma to get me. I fired a warning shot and bailed out into space while he threw a flashbang after me to curse the darkness of the void. I decided it was time to try a different attack angle, but but was out of ideas. I ended up setting a charge near the armory, not really knowing where I was. I exchanged a shot with the sec officer over there and then planted my last X4 charge elsewhere, this time in the execution chamber. It was at this point I finally could see Adler through the walls, but I was out of explosives. I played the gambit of cutting wires to the door to unlock it between me and Adler's area, but the first wire I cut shocked me. Conveniently just in time for a sec officer to get the drop on me from space. I hit him with one bullet before he apprehended me and brought me into the brig. We traded accusations with each other while the head of security asked the captain for permission to execute me. Their searching for contraband uncovered the half dozen or so welders I took with me, and that didn't really help my case with security much. In fact, the space lawyer bailed out on my case when he saw the welders. The warden played out his fantasies of being a roided out cop typing in bold letters, while I progressed through the various stages of traitor grief. My appeals to the warden on account of sharing a name didn't work either. I was out of options and started trying to get out my cuffs, even though I knew I had no chance of making it out of the brig. And what was worse was that the room was running out of oxygen. They set up the electric chair, and I told them to get on with it like a significantly less badass version of Marv before shuffling off this mortal coil. I saw after the fact that they stashed Adler in some sort of solitary confinement cell I had no knowledge of. And to be honest, it would have been pretty easy to take him out if I went about things more carefully. But oh well, die and learn. I earned that execution by breaching into the armory, making myself valid. And while they seemed to have a penchant for being overly dramatic, in the end most of security, including my executioner, died later that shift anyway, to a nightmare that busted into the brig. So they got their comeuppance for doing their job, so to speak, like a specimen donor who did his deed in the vomit comet.